Marina and George had just marked 5 years of marriage, a milestone stitched together with shared triumphs and everyday challenges. They'd weathered the awkward early days of cohabiting, the nerve-wracking introductions to each other's families, and the occasional rough patch that love tends to bring along. Sure, there had been hiccups, but somehow, through the ups and downs, their bond stayed rock solid. That whirlwind of a first year had mellowed into a rhythm of peace and predictability. But sometimes, comfort comes with blind spots. One evening, Marina had plans to attend a friend's bachelorette bash. The itinerary was typical spa treatments, a fancy dinner, and whatever else the night might throw in. George, for his part, wasn't the kind of husband to set rules or boundaries. He trusted Marina completely, and knew how deeply she cherished their marriage. In his mind, cheating wasn't even a possibility. He had always been attentive to her needs, going out of his way to make sure she felt loved, heard, and cared for. Their relationship, he believed, was built on mutual respect and loyalty. Later that night, George got a ping from his banking app. A considerable sum had been withdrawn using his card, the same one he'd handed to Marina before she left, just in case she wanted to treat herself. He paused for a moment, puzzled, but shrugged it off. Money wasn't an issue. His job paid well, and if Marina wanted to splurge, so be it. Her happiness came first. Around 2 in the morning, Marina returned, her perfume mingling with the faint scent of sparkling wine. She looked drained but content. With a soft laugh, she recounted bits of the night, and then slipped straight into bed. George quietly pulled the blanket over her, turned out the lights, and settled in beside her, comforted by her presence. Weeks passed. Life rolled on, business as usual. One day, after wrapping up a client meeting, George headed out for lunch with a few colleagues. They grabbed a spot at a nearby cafe, and as they browsed the menu, the conversation veered into uncharted territory: strip clubs and the people who frequented them. One of the guys brought up a friend named Vadim, who apparently worked as a male stripper. The stories he'd shared were, to say the least, wild, and naturally, the group leaned in, hungry for the juicy details. According to the tale, Vadim was strictly professional, never crossing the line with clients. But about a month ago, something different had happened. At a bachelorette party, one of the women had approached him with a bold offer, a private rendezvous for a price. Everyone at the table chuckled, but George froze. That night, the money withdrawal, Marina's spa evening, it all started to connect uncomfortably. The description of the woman hit too close to home. It sounded just like Marina. Still, George tried to keep his cool, brushing off the unease curling in his gut. Just a coincidence, right? Then came the punch. One of the guys added, chuckling. Vadim said she was married kinda, but didn't seem to mind. Said she was pretty hot and, well, not bad in bed either. George's stomach twisted. The world tilted for a second. His heart pounded, and a cold sweat crept up his neck. He tried to convince himself it meant nothing, that he was reading too much into it. But the seed of doubt had already taken root. He knew he had to talk to Marina. They'd always been open with each other, but this would be different, and hard. Still, he needed answers. When he got home, though, the house was silent. Marina wasn't there. She often stayed late at work, but lately, it had been happening more than usual. George frowned. Something wasn't sitting right anymore. A while later, the door slammed open. He heard the unmistakable thud of her heels kicked off in the hallway, followed by her bag being flung onto the nearest armchair. She sighed loudly. The boss dumped another stack of reports on me. I barely got out of there alive, she complained, rummaging through the fridge in search of something to eat. But when she turned around, she found George staring at her intently, his expression unreadable and cold. She closed the fridge door slowly. "What's going on?" "We need to talk," George said, his voice calm but firm. Marina raised an eyebrow. "Can we eat first?" I could fry some potatoes. Or we could just order sushi. He shook his head. No, this can't wait. It's important. Wordlessly, Marina sat down across from him, her gaze steady. All right. What is it? What's bothering you? George hesitated for a beat. Then, deciding against any sugarcoating, he went straight for the jugular. Marina, are you seeing someone else? For a brief moment, her eyes widened just a flicker, almost imperceptible, but then she softened her face into a calm, practiced smile. Marina stood in stunned silence, the color draining from her face as she met Vadim's eyes. For a brief moment, the hallway fell into a hush so tense it seemed to hum. Her lips parted, either to question or to refute, but nothing came out. Vadim, sensing something was wrong, took a half step back. Marina blinked, swallowing hard. Why? Why would you say that? She whispered. I was told to, Vadim muttered, his charm dissipating as confusion set in. Look, a guy named George asked me to say that line. Said it was from a movie you liked. The name hit her like a slap. Her head snapped toward the hallway, her eyes narrowing. George? She echoed, more to herself than Vadim. That was when George stepped into the light. His expression was composed, but the silence around him spoke volumes. He glanced at Marina, then turned to Vadim. You can go, he said calmly. Vadim looked between them, then gave an uncomfortable nod and backed out of the doorway. Marina tried to speak, tried to frame a response, but George raised a hand. Don't, he said quietly. I didn't set this up to hear lies. I just needed to see it. I wasn't going to, she started. But you were expecting someone, weren't you? His voice cracked ever so slightly now. Someone who wasn't me. Her silence confirmed everything. I looked you in the eyes, he continued, his voice breaking, and you lied. Tears welled up in Marina's eyes, but everyone had already turned away. Without saying another word, he walked past her into the bedroom and closed the door behind him, not with a bang, but with a heavy, final click. The divorce took place, and it turned out that Marina's pregnancy was the result of an affair that she started after a bachelorette party. George was not bothered by this news. He knew that now she would take care of her father, a dancer. As for the property, everything remained with him, leaving Marina the opportunity to move in with her mother or a new lover. But her husband's grief didn't care. The most important thing for him was that he was free from an unfaithful wife. As they say, an unfaithful wife is a stranger in the house. And he completely agreed with her.